My name is Melissa, and I'm 28 years old. I've always been my family's financial safety net, and honestly, I never minded helping out. For months, I'd been planning our annual family barbecue, a tradition that meant everything to me. But what happened this year changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. I found out the truth in the worst possible way, and it shattered my heart completely. Before I share what happened, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Now, let me tell you how my world fell apart. The foundation of my relationship with my family had always been built on trust and mutual support. As a successful marketing coordinator at a mid-sized advertising firm in downtown Chicago, I'd worked my way up from an entry-level position after college. My salary wasn't extraordinary, but it was stable and allowed me to live comfortably in a modest apartment while still having enough left over to help my family when they needed it. And they needed it often. My parents, Robert and Patricia, lived in the same suburban house where I grew up, about 45 minutes outside the city. Dad worked as a maintenance supervisor at a local manufacturing plant, while Mom had recently started a part-time job at a retail store after years of being a stay-at-home parent. My younger sister Ashley, 25, was a freelance graphic designer who struggled with inconsistent income, and my brother Kevin, 23, was finishing his final year of college while working nights at a restaurant. The annual family barbecue wasn't just any ordinary gathering. It was a tradition started by my late grandmother, Dad's mother, who passed away when I was 15. She used to say that food brought families together like nothing else could, and every summer, she'd host elaborate backyard feasts with homemade everything. After she died, the tradition fell to my parents, but over the years, as finances got tighter and life got more complicated, I gradually took over the planning and much of the funding. I didn't mind. It felt like a way to honor Grandma's memory while keeping our family connected. This year, I'd been planning since March. I'd already put down deposits on the tent rental, ordered custom decorations, planned the menu, and even arranged for a local band to play Grandma's favorite songs. The guest list included not just immediate family but aunts, uncles, cousins, and longtime family friends. It was going to be the biggest and best barbecue yet, and I was genuinely excited about bringing everyone together. That Tuesday evening in early June, when my phone rang and Dad's name appeared on the screen, I answered cheerfully, expecting to discuss final details for the party that was just 4 days away. Instead, his voice sounded heavy and apologetic from the first word. "Melissa, honey, I need to talk to you about something important," he said, and immediately my stomach dropped. Dad only used that tone when something was seriously wrong. "What's going on, Dad? Is everyone okay?" I asked, setting down the barbecue planning notebook I'd been reviewing. "Everyone's fine, sweetheart, but we need to cancel the barbecue this weekend. I know how much work you've put into it, and I feel terrible about this, but we just can't make it happen this year." His voice cracked slightly, and I could hear genuine distress. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Cancel? Dad, what happened?" "We've been planning this for months." He sighed deeply before explaining. "Your mother lost her part-time job last week. The store is downsizing, and they let go of all the newest employees. Ashley's car broke down, and the repair bill is going to be over $1,000. She can't work without transportation. And Kevin's student loan payment increased because he's in his final semester, and the restaurant cut his hours." I listened, my heart sinking with each detail. These weren't frivolous problems. They were real financial emergencies that my family was facing all at once. "I know you've probably already spent money on preparations," Dad continued, "and I promise we'll pay you back as soon as we can. But right now, we can't afford gas money for people to drive out here, let alone contribute to food and supplies. It wouldn't be right to ask you to cover everything when you've already done so much." My immediate instinct was to solve the problem. "Dad, don't worry about the money. I can handle the expenses." I've been saving specifically for this, and I don't mind covering everything. This tradition is too important to skip. No, Melissa, he said firmly, more firmly than I'd expected. We can't keep letting you carry the financial burden for the whole family. It's not fair to you, and it's not sustainable. We need to skip this year and get back on our feet first. I tried to argue, offering to scale back the plans, suggesting we make it potluck style, proposing dozens of alternatives. But Dad remained adamant. The barbecue was off, and that was final. He thanked me for understanding, promised this was just temporary, and said we'd make it up next year. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the planning notebook filled with 3 months of preparation. I'd already purchased decorations, had groceries ordered for pickup, and confirmed RSVPs from 32 people. Part of me felt proud that my family trusted me enough to be honest about their financial struggles, and another part felt disappointed that something I'd looked forward to for months was suddenly gone. I spent the rest of the evening calling vendors to cancel orders where possible, though I'd lose the deposits. The florist was understanding. The band was able to book another gig, but the tent rental company would only refund 50%. I decided I'd still have a small personal barbecue in my apartment building's courtyard, maybe grill a burger and remember Grandma in my own way. The next morning, I woke up with a strange mix of disappointment and determination. Even though the family gathering was canceled, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to do something to honor our tradition. After calling in sick to work, claiming I needed a mental health day, I decided to go grocery shopping for a scaled-down version of the barbecue menu. Walking through the supermarket aisles alone felt surreal. I'd planned to buy food for over 30 people, and now I was selecting single portions of everything. The meat department, where I usually ordered bulk quantities of ribs, chicken, and hamburger patties, felt cavernous as I picked up a package containing just 2 burger patties and a few chicken thighs. The produce section, where I typically filled multiple carts with corn, tomatoes, and salad ingredients, seemed almost mocking as I selected a single ear of corn and 1 tomato. Other shoppers around me were clearly preparing for their own gatherings. I watched a woman with 3 young children loading her cart with party supplies and bulk snacks, heard a couple debating whether 12 pounds of ribs would be enough for their cookout, and observed an elderly man carefully selecting ingredients for what was obviously a family recipe. Each interaction reminded me of what I was missing, but I tried to focus on the positive aspects of having a quiet, reflective celebration. The checkout process was particularly depressing. Instead of needing multiple carts and expecting a grocery bill in the hundreds, I stood in the express lane with a small basket containing maybe $20 worth of food. The cashier, a cheerful teenager, made small talk about the beautiful weather being perfect for barbecues, and I forced a smile while agreeing that it would indeed be a lovely day for outdoor cooking. Back at my apartment, I began the familiar but miniaturized process of barbecue preparation. I arranged my few decorations in the building's small courtyard area, hanging string lights that were meant for a much larger space. The effect was more pathetic than festive, but I convinced myself it was cozy rather than sad. I prepared a small batch of Grandma's famous marinade, the recipe I'd memorized by heart, though mixing it for just a few pieces of chicken felt almost insulting to her memory. My phone buzzed occasionally with messages from the family group chat. Ashley posted a photo of her car at the repair shop with a caption about unexpected expenses. Kevin shared a screenshot of his increased student loan payment with multiple crying emojis. Mom sent a message to the group saying she was spending the day applying for new jobs online. Dad remained quiet, which was unusual for him in the family chat. I responded supportively to each message, offering encouragement and reminding them that next year's barbecue would be even better. But as the day progressed, I noticed something odd about their responses. Usually, our family group chat was lively and conversational, with multiple people responding to each message and conversations flowing naturally. Today, everyone seemed to respond directly to my messages, but avoided engaging with each other. Looking back through my phone's photo gallery, I found pictures from previous barbecues that made my chest tight with nostalgia. There was Grandma in her floral apron, teaching 8-year-old me how to flip burgers without burning them. A photo of Dad and Uncle Mike having their annual corn eating contest while everyone cheered. Ashley and Kevin as teenagers, complaining about family photos, but secretly loving the attention. Mom and her sister laughing so hard at some forgotten joke that tears streamed down their faces. These weren't just gatherings. They were the moments that defined our family identity. The barbecue was where we celebrated graduations, announced pregnancies, worked through disagreements, and created the stories we'd tell for years afterward. Skipping it felt like skipping Christmas or Thanksgiving. It felt wrong on a fundamental level. As evening approached, I noticed some strange activity on social media that made me increasingly uncomfortable. Ashley posted an Instagram story showing her at a grocery store, but instead of picking up necessities like I expected, her cart seemed to contain party supplies. The image was brief and partially obscured, but I could swear I saw paper plates, plastic cups, and what looked like charcoal. Kevin's Snapchat showed him at a liquor store, laughing with friends and carrying a case of beer. When I checked the location tag, it showed he was near my parents' house, not his college campus. I tried to push down the growing unease. Maybe Ashley was helping a friend with their party preparations. Maybe Kevin was visiting home and picking up drinks for Dad. There were perfectly reasonable explanations for everything I was seeing. But my intuition, the same instinct that had helped me succeed in marketing by reading between the lines and noticing inconsistencies, was screaming that something wasn't right. I spent that evening in the courtyard, grilling my small meal and eating alone while neighbors' barbecues filled the air with laughter and music. The string lights I'd hung looked ridiculous in the small space, and the single-place setting at the tiny table felt like a monument to loneliness. I tried calling Grandma's memory into the moment, imagining what she would say about adaptability and making the best of difficult situations, but even her imagined wisdom couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect weather that made you believe in divine intervention. The sky was clear blue without a single cloud, the temperature sat at a comfortable 72 degrees, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers from the building's landscaping. It was exactly the kind of day Grandma used to call barbecue blessed, and the irony wasn't lost on me that this perfect weather was going to be wasted on my solitary celebration. I woke up early, as I always did on barbecue day, driven by years of habit and the muscle memory of preparation. Usually, this would be the day I'd arrive at my parents' house before 7 in the morning to start the slow cooking process for ribs and prep all the side dishes. Instead, I found myself wandering around my apartment, unsure how to fill the time before my abbreviated afternoon cookout. I'd set up my small grill on the courtyard the night before, along with a folding table and chair that looked absurdly formal for a party of one. The decorations I'd hung seemed to mock me in the morning light, too elaborate for the tiny space and too sparse for the emotional weight I'd placed on them. But I was committed to following through, if only to prove to myself that I could maintain our family traditions even in isolation. Around noon, I began the cooking process. Lighting the small charcoal grill felt ceremonial but hollow. Usually, this moment would be accompanied by Dad's commentary about proper fire management and Kevin's impatient questions about when the food would be ready. Today, the only sounds were distant lawn mowers and the occasional car passing by on the street. I grilled 2 hamburger patties for chicken thighs and 1 ear of corn. The smell was exactly right, triggering powerful memories of past barbecues, but the portions looked ridiculous on the large grill grate. I'd prepared Grandma's potato salad recipe, though scaling it down to serve one person had required some creative mathematics with the measurements. The result tasted right but felt wrong, like singing a duet alone. While the meat cooked, I tried to recreate other barbecue traditions. I played the same playlist I'd compiled for the family gathering, featuring Grandma's favorite songs, mixed with more contemporary tracks that Ashley and Kevin enjoyed. But music that was designed to fill a backyard full of people felt overwhelming in the small courtyard. I lowered the volume until it was barely audible, then turned it off completely. I'd brought down photo albums from previous barbecues, thinking I could flip through them while eating and feel connected to past celebrations. Instead, looking at images of family members laughing and embracing just made the empty chair across from me feel more prominent. Every photo reminded me of what I was missing, rather than what I was honoring. The eating process was the most depressing part. I'd set the table with real plates and cloth napkins, trying to maintain some dignity in the experience. But sitting alone with a full place setting felt more like dining with a ghost than having a celebration. I found myself listening for familiar voices, expecting Dad to comment on the chicken's seasoning or Mom to fuss about everyone eating enough vegetables. My phone remained frustratingly quiet throughout the afternoon. Usually, barbecue day involved constant communication with family members about timing, who was bringing what, and updates on travel plans. Today, the family group chat showed no activity at all. I'd posted a photo of my small setup with a caption about keeping the tradition alive, but the response was minimal, just a few heart emojis from Ashley and a looks good from Kevin. No questions about how I was doing, no expressions of regret about missing the gathering, no suggestions for making it up later. As the afternoon progressed, I became increasingly aware of other people's barbecues happening around me. The apartment complex was full of the sounds of celebration, children playing, adults laughing, music from multiple directions, and the constant sizzle of various grills. Through the fence, I could see my neighbor's backyard filled with extended family, exactly the kind of gathering I'd planned for my own family. The contrast was painful and impossible to ignore. I tried to maintain a positive attitude by focusing on practical benefits. No stress about coordinating schedules, no worry about having enough food, no pressure to be the perfect hostess. But these advantages felt hollow compared to the absence of connection and shared joy that made barbecues meaningful in the first place. The most unsettling part of the day was the social media silence from my family. Usually, Ashley was constantly posting photos of our gatherings, tagging everyone and creating digital memories we'd look back on for months. Kevin typically shared stories about family traditions and tagged friends to make them jealous of our food. Mom and Dad weren't heavy social media users, but they usually appeared in other people's posts throughout the day. Today, it was as if my entire family had disappeared from the internet. I checked their location settings on various apps, a habit I developed over the years of coordinating family logistics. Ashley's location showed she was at home, which made sense given her car troubles. Kevin's location was turned off entirely, which was unusual but not unprecedented. Mom and Dad didn't share locations regularly, so their absence from the digital world wasn't necessarily suspicious. But something felt wrong. My family wasn't the type to completely disconnect, especially on a day when they knew I was struggling with the canceled plans. Usually, they'd be checking on me, sharing photos of their alternative activities, or at least maintaining more communication. The silence felt deliberate rather than coincidental. As evening approached and I cleaned up my modest celebration, I found myself questioning whether I'd made the right choice in accepting the cancellation so easily. Part of me wondered if I should have insisted more strongly on helping with the financial aspects, or if there were creative solutions we hadn't explored. But Dad had been so firm about not wanting to burden me further, and I'd respected that boundary even though it meant sacrificing something that meant so much to me. The day ended with me sitting alone in the courtyard as the sun set, surrounded by the fading decorations and empty plates. Other family celebrations continued around me, their laughter and music serving as a soundtrack to my isolation. I felt proud of myself for maintaining the tradition in my own way, but also deeply sad about what felt like the beginning of the end of something precious. As darkness settled over the apartment complex and the sounds of neighboring barbecues began to fade, I found myself in my kitchen washing the few dishes from my solitary celebration. The process felt anticlimactic after such an emotionally charged day. Usually, post-barbecue cleanup was a group effort filled with continued conversation and the satisfying exhaustion that comes from a day well spent with loved ones. Tonight, I finished washing everything in less than 10 minutes and was left standing in my kitchen with nothing but silence and the lingering smell of charcoal on my clothes. I was putting away the last plate when my phone buzzed with a notification that would change everything. At first glance, it seemed routine. Ashley had started an Instagram live session. My sister occasionally did live streams about her graphic design work or random thoughts, so I almost ignored it. But something compelled me to click on the notification, maybe the hope of seeing a familiar face after such an isolating day. The video loaded, and for a moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing. The image was slightly shaky as Ashley moved around with her phone, but the background was unmistakably familiar. It was a backyard, but not just any backyard. It was my parents' backyard, the same space where every family barbecue had taken place for the past decade. But this wasn't the quiet, financially strapped household I'd imagined based on our phone conversation just days before. The yard was completely transformed. Professional-grade string lights created a warm canopy overhead, far more elaborate than anything we'd ever had at previous barbecues. A large white tent dominated the lawn, the kind that required professional installation and cost several $100s to rent. Underneath it, I could see multiple tables covered with crisp white linens and centerpieces that looked professionally arranged. But it was the people that made my blood run cold. This wasn't a small, intimate gathering of immediate family trying to make the best of a difficult situation. The yard was filled with at least 30 people, all dressed nicely and clearly enjoying themselves. I recognized faces from our usual barbecue guest list: aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, and neighbors who had been coming to our gatherings for years. Ashley's camera panned across the scene as she narrated her live stream with obvious excitement. "Just having the most amazing time at our annual family barbecue," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. "Mom and Dad really outdid themselves this year." The camera captured details that made my stomach drop further with each passing second. There was Kevin manning an elaborate outdoor cooking station that looked like something from a professional catering company. Multiple grills were going simultaneously, tended by people in matching aprons that I'd never seen before. The food spread visible on the tables included shrimp cocktail, prime rib, specialty salads, and desserts that were clearly from an upscale bakery rather than homemade. A professional DJ booth was set up near the house, complete with speakers and lighting equipment that would have cost more to rent than I spent on groceries in a month. The music was exactly the kind of high-energy party soundtrack that would require expensive equipment to sound that clear and powerful. This wasn't someone's personal playlist coming through a Bluetooth speaker. This was a professionally managed sound system. As Ashley continued streaming, moving through the crowd and chatting with guests, I recognized my father in the background. He was wearing a brand new barbecue apron with Grill Master Robert embroidered across the front, laughing loudly with Uncle Mike and holding what appeared to be an expensive craft beer. This was not the stressed, financially strapped man who had called me in distress just 4 days earlier. Mom appeared in the frame next, directing what looked like catering staff as they refreshed food stations and collected empty plates. She was wearing a new dress I'd never seen before and jewelry that sparkled under the professional lighting. Her hair was styled in a way that indicated she'd been to a salon recently, and her makeup was more elaborate than I'd seen her wear even to formal events. The comments section of Ashley's live stream was filling up with responses from people I recognized. Family friends were thanking my parents for another incredible annual party and praising the food and entertainment. Cousins who lived out of state were commenting about how glad they were that they'd made the trip this year, and how the party was worth every mile of the drive. But what broke my heart most completely was reading comments that referenced the tradition itself. People were talking about how this was the best barbecue yet and praising my parents for keeping the family tradition alive and never missing a year. Someone even commented about how impressive it was that Mom and Dad had pulled this together despite everything going on. Ashley responded to comments as she streamed, thanking people for coming and agreeing that it was definitely our best party ever. When someone asked about the professional setup, she laughed and said something about how Dad had really gone all out this year and wanted to make it extra special. I sat frozen in my kitchen, phone shaking in my hands, as the truth crashed over me in waves. This wasn't a last-minute gathering that had come together organically. The level of professional coordination, the elaborate decorations, the catering, the DJ, and the guest attendance all pointed to weeks or months of planning. This was exactly the barbecue I had been organizing, just without me. The realization that every family member had lied to me directly was devastating enough. But seeing evidence that they had deliberately excluded me from an event that I had not only planned to fund, but had been planning for months, made the betrayal feel intentional and cruel. This wasn't about money or financial hardship. This was about something much deeper and more painful. As Ashley's live stream continued, showing fireworks being set up in the background, I began taking screenshots of everything. The evidence of the elaborate party, the professional setup, the guest list, and the comments all painted a picture that completely contradicted everything I'd been told. I needed to document what I was seeing, partly for my own sanity and partly because I suspected this was only the beginning of a much larger deception. The stream ended after about 15 minutes, but the damage was complete. I sat in my dark kitchen, staring at the screenshots on my phone, feeling like everything I thought I knew about my family and my place in it had been a lie. The lonely barbecue I'd had that afternoon, which had felt like a meaningful way to honor tradition despite difficult circumstances, now felt like the pathetic consolation prize it actually was. The hours following Ashley's live stream passed in a blur of disbelief, anger, and heartbreak that I'd never experienced before. I found myself unable to move from my kitchen table, staring at the screenshots I'd taken as if looking at them long enough might reveal some alternative explanation for what I'd witnessed. But no matter how many times I reviewed the images, the conclusion remained the same. My family had deliberately and systematically deceived me. The physical symptoms of shock set in first. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I held my phone, and I felt simultaneously hot and cold, as if my body couldn't regulate its temperature. My stomach churned with nausea, and I realized I hadn't eaten anything since my solitary barbecue hours earlier, though the thought of food made me feel worse. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes from the live stream. Dad's new apron, Mom directing catering staff, Kevin laughing with extended family who had supposedly been too financially strapped to attend. I began replaying Dad's phone call from Tuesday night, analyzing every word and tone with the clarity that comes from knowing you've been manipulated. His voice had carried such convincing distress when he talked about Mom losing her job, Ashley's car repairs, and Kevin's increased student loans. He'd sounded genuinely apologetic about canceling the barbecue, even emotional when he talked about disappointing me after all my planning. But now I realized that every detail had been carefully crafted to create maximum sympathy while providing justifiable reasons for exclusion. Mom's job loss explained why they couldn't contribute financially. Ashley's car troubles justified her absence from planning activities. Kevin's student loan issues provided cover for why he couldn't help with expenses. Together, these stories created a narrative that made me feel guilty for even offering to pay for everything, exactly as Dad had intended. The level of coordination required for the deception became more apparent as I thought through the logistics. Someone had to secure the tent rental, hire the catering staff, book the DJ, arrange for professional lighting, and coordinate with all the guests. These weren't last-minute decisions made after our phone call. They were arrangements that would have been finalized weeks or months in advance, potentially while I was still actively planning the original barbecue. I spent the next several hours going through my family's social media accounts like a detective, looking for clues I'd missed. Ashley's Instagram stories from the past week, which I'd only glanced at previously, now took on new meaning. Photos I'd interpreted as random daily activities could now be seen as party preparation. A picture of her at a party supply store that I'd assumed was for a client project. A video of her testing sound equipment that I'd thought was for her graphic design work. An image of her with Mom at what I'd assumed was a casual shopping trip, but now I could see catering menus in the background. Kevin's social media revealed similar hidden activity. His Snapchat location history, which I could access because we'd connected our accounts for family safety years earlier, showed multiple visits to party rental companies and specialty food stores over the past 2 weeks. A post about helping with family projects that I'd assumed meant household chores now seemed obviously related to party planning. Even Mom, who barely used social media, had subtle indicators of preparation. Her Facebook account showed she'd been added to event planning groups and had received messages from catering companies. She'd liked posts from several local businesses that specialized in party equipment and entertainment services. The financial implications hit me next, and they were staggering. Based on what I'd seen in the live stream, the total cost of the party easily exceeded $3,000. The tent rental alone would have been at least $500. Professional catering for 30-plus people would have cost well over $1,000. The DJ, lighting, flowers, premium alcohol, and specialty foods would have added hundreds more. Even if they'd gotten deals or called in favors, this was an expensive production. I grabbed a calculator and began working through the numbers, feeling sicker with each calculation. Over the past 6 months, my family had asked for and received financial help from me totaling nearly $4,000. Dad had needed $800 for car repairs in January. Mom had asked for $600 to cover medical bills in March. Ashley had received $700 for various emergencies, including rent and utilities. Kevin had gotten help with textbooks and living expenses, totaling nearly $2,000. At the time, each request had seemed reasonable and urgent. Dad's car repair was necessary for him to get to work. Mom's medical bills were from genuine health issues that insurance hadn't covered completely. Ashley's graphic design business had legitimate slow periods that affected her income. Kevin's college expenses were real and substantial. But now I had to consider the possibility that some or all of these requests had been orchestrated to fund a party that I was specifically excluded from. The timing was particularly suspicious when I laid it out chronologically. The requests had increased in frequency starting in March, exactly when I would have been discussing barbecue plans with the family. The most recent request, Kevin's need for textbook money, had come just 2 weeks before Dad's call about canceling the barbecue. Sleep was impossible that night. Every time I tried to close my eyes, my mind raced with questions and implications. Why had they decided to exclude me? Was it something I'd done or said? Had I been too controlling about previous barbecues? Was there some family dynamic I'd missed or misunderstood? Or was this simply about money, with my family seeing me as a convenient funding source rather than an integral part of the celebration? The emotional pain was unlike anything I'd experienced, even including the grief of losing Grandma. This felt like a death of a different kind, the death of trust, of family identity, and of the naive belief that the people who loved you most would never deliberately hurt you. I'd always known my family had flaws and complications, but I'd never imagined they were capable of such calculated deception. By sunrise, I was exhausted but more clear-headed about what had happened. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a series of unfortunate coincidences. This was a deliberate exclusion backed by months of planning and funded by money they'd obtained from me under false pretenses. The barbecue hadn't been canceled due to financial hardship. It had been reorganized without me, possibly because my presence would have complicated their ability to enjoy the fruits of their deception. The question now was what to do with this knowledge. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately, to demand explanations and apologies. But another part of me suspected that this revelation was only the beginning, and that waiting to see how they'd handle the aftermath might reveal even more about their true intentions toward me. As it turned out, I wouldn't have to wait long for the next chapter of their betrayal to unfold. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzly, as if the weather had shifted to match my emotional state. I'd finally fallen asleep around 4 in the morning, only to wake up 3 hours later feeling more exhausted than when I'd gone to bed. My first instinct was to check my phone for any messages from family members, perhaps acknowledgments of the party or explanations for what I'd witnessed. Instead, I found only silence in the group chat and no individual messages from anyone. I made coffee with shaking hands and tried to decide on my next steps. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately about the live stream, but I also felt curious about whether any of them would voluntarily mention the party or offer any explanation for the deception. I decided to wait and see if anyone would break the silence first. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 9:37 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text message from Dad that made my blood pressure spike instantly. "Morning, sweetheart. Hope you had a nice, quiet weekend. I hate to bother you on Sunday, but we've got some urgent bills that came up unexpectedly. Could you help us out with $2,800? Mom's got some medical expenses that insurance won't cover, and the mortgage payment is due tomorrow. I know it's a lot to ask, but you know we wouldn't reach out unless it was really important. Love you." I stared at the message in complete disbelief. Less than 12 hours after I'd watched evidence of them spending thousands of dollars on an elaborate party, Dad was asking me for nearly $3,000 for supposed emergencies. The audacity was breathtaking, but what made it even more insulting was the emotional manipulation embedded in the message. The casual "hope you had a nice, quiet weekend" felt like mockery, given that he knew exactly how I'd spent my weekend after they'd excluded me from the family gathering. The "you know we wouldn't reach out unless it was really important" was particularly galling, considering how many times they'd reached out for money over the past months, apparently to fund their secret party planning. I took screenshots of Dad's message, adding them to the collection of evidence I'd gathered from Ashley's live stream. Then I sat back in my kitchen chair and let the anger build. This wasn't just about the money, though the financial manipulation was serious enough. This was about respect, honesty, and the fundamental dynamics of our family relationships. They had positioned me as the family bank account while excluding me from the family celebration, and now they expected me to continue funding their lifestyle without question. But before responding to Dad, I decided to do some research. I logged into the social media accounts of people who had attended the party, looking for additional evidence and getting a fuller picture of the event's scope. What I found was even more damaging than I'd expected. Family friends had posted dozens of photos and videos from the barbecue, tagging my parents and siblings throughout. The images showed elaborate food stations, professional decorations, and a guest list that included people who lived several states away. In the comments, people were praising my parents for their generosity and amazing hospitality. Several posts specifically mentioned that this was the best barbecue yet and praised Dad for really going all out this year. Uncle Mike had posted a video of Dad giving a toast to the assembled guests, thanking everyone for coming to their annual family tradition and talking about how important it was to keep the family together through good times and bad. The irony of this statement, given that they deliberately excluded me, was so thick it was almost comical. Most infuriatingly, I found posts from earlier in the day showing family members preparing for the party. Ashley had posted Instagram stories of herself setting up decorations and arranging flowers. Kevin had shared photos of himself helping with food preparation alongside what were clearly professional caterers. Mom had posted a rare Facebook update showing her getting ready for a special family day with photos of her at a hair salon. All of this social media activity had happened while they maintained complete silence in our family group chat, and while I spent my day alone, thinking they were struggling financially and feeling guilty about the canceled barbecue. The level of deception was staggering, But what made it worse was the realization that dozens of extended family members and friends were complicit in excluding me from an event that had supposedly been canceled for financial reasons. Armed with this evidence, I crafted my response to Dad's money request. I wanted to be strategic rather than purely emotional, giving them a chance to explain themselves while making it clear that I knew exactly what had happened. "Hi, Dad," I wrote. "I saw Ashley's Instagram live last night from what looked like an amazing barbecue party in your backyard. The professional setup looked incredible, and it seemed like everyone had a wonderful time. I'm confused, though, because I thought the barbecue was canceled due to financial constraints. Could you help me understand how we went from not being able to afford the barbecue on Tuesday to having what appeared to be a very expensive party on Saturday? I'm particularly confused about your request for $2,800 this morning, given the apparent costs of last night's event. I'd appreciate some clarification before we discuss any financial assistance." I sent the message and immediately began taking screenshots of everything I could find related to the party. I documented the guest list from various social media posts, calculated estimated costs based on visible services and supplies, and compiled a timeline of events that clearly showed the deception had been planned well in advance. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing with activity in the family group chat. Ashley posted a message claiming the live stream had shown a small gathering that had been thrown together last minute. Kevin jumped in to support her story, saying it had been just a few people who stopped by and that the setup wasn't as elaborate as it appeared on camera. Mom added that they'd used leftover decorations from previous years and that friends had brought most of the food. But their stories immediately contradicted each other and the evidence I'd gathered. Ashley's claim of a small gathering was absurd given the guest count visible in social media posts. Kevin's description of people stopping by didn't align with the professional catering and DJ services that were clearly documented. Mom's explanation about leftover decorations was laughable when compared to the sophisticated lighting and tent setup that required professional installation. Dad remained silent in the group chat, but sent me a private message attempting to maintain the original deception. I think Ashley's live stream made things look bigger than they were. We had a few neighbors over for burgers, nothing fancy. The money I'm asking for is completely separate from any social activities. These are real bills that need to be paid immediately. His response confirmed what I'd suspected. They had no intention of being honest with me, even when confronted with direct evidence of their deception. They were going to continue the lies and expect me to pretend I hadn't seen what I'd clearly witnessed. That's when I decided to take a more public approach. I posted a side-by-side comparison on my own social media accounts, Dad's text asking for $2,800 next to screenshots from Ashley's live stream showing the elaborate party. I included a caption that read, "Interesting how family financial emergencies work. Tuesday, we're too broke for the barbecue, sorry. Saturday, professional catering, DJ, fireworks. Sunday, can you send $2,800 for bills?" I'm starting to think I've been funding more than I realized. I tagged all of my family members in the post, along with several family friends who had attended the party. Within an hour, the post had dozens of likes and comments from friends expressing shock and support. More importantly, family friends who had attended the barbecue began commenting with their own confusion about the conflicting stories they were seeing. The family group chat exploded with angry messages demanding I take down the post. Ashley accused me of airing family business publicly and embarrassing everyone. Kevin claimed I was overreacting and making a big deal out of nothing. Mom sent private messages saying I was hurting the family and that we should handle this privately. But it was Dad's response that confirmed I'd made the right decision. Instead of apologizing or attempting to explain, he sent a message that was pure manipulation. "I can't believe you'd humiliate your family like this over money. After everything we've done for you over the years, this is how you repay us? You're destroying our relationships with friends and extended family because you're jealous of a simple gathering. This is exactly why we didn't include you in the first place." That final sentence revealed the truth he'd been trying to hide. my exclusion had been deliberate from the beginning. This wasn't about financial hardship or protecting me from burden. This was about them wanting to enjoy the fruits of my financial support without having to include me in their celebration. I responded to his message with a simple statement: "You're right, Dad. This is exactly why you didn't include me. And this is exactly why I won't be including you in my financial support anymore." Then I blocked all of their numbers temporarily and took a long, hot shower to wash away the emotional residue of the most toxic 24 hours of my life. The immediate aftermath of going public with my family's deception was both liberating and overwhelming. Within hours of posting the evidence on social media, I received dozens of messages from friends, extended family members, and even strangers who had witnessed similar situations. The support was unexpected and healing, but it also opened my eyes to how common financial manipulation within families actually is. I wasn't alone in this experience, though that realization came with its own complicated emotions. The first step in protecting myself was practical. I changed all my banking passwords and removed the family members who had access to various accounts for emergency purposes. Over the years, I'd given Dad access to one of my savings accounts so he could deposit checks for me when I was traveling for work, and Mom had the login information for my credit card account because she'd helped me dispute some fraudulent charges. These conveniences, which had seemed like normal family arrangements, now felt like vulnerabilities that needed to be addressed immediately. I also called my bank to inform them about the situation and ask about protections against potential manipulation. The customer service representative, who had obviously handled similar calls before, walked me through additional security measures and helped me set up alerts for any unusual account activity. She also provided me with resources about financial abuse and suggested I document everything I could remember about past money requests and their stated purposes. The documentation process was more painful than I'd anticipated. Going through 6 months of text messages, bank transfers, and Venmo transactions revealed patterns I'd missed while I was living through them. The requests had indeed increased in frequency starting in March, and they often came with urgent timelines that discouraged careful consideration. "Need to pay this by tomorrow," and "the deadline is today" were common phrases that had been used to pressure me into quick decisions. More disturbing was the realization that several of the emergencies had been fabricated entirely. Ashley's rent emergency in April had occurred during the same week she'd posted Instagram stories from an expensive weekend trip to Nashville. Kevin's textbook costs in May had been requested just before he'd posted photos of himself at expensive restaurants and entertainment venues. Even some of Mom and Dad's emergencies, when I researched them more carefully, didn't align with the medical bills and household expenses they'd claimed. The emotional processing was harder than the practical steps. I'd always defined myself partly through my role as the family helper, the one who could be counted on to solve problems and provide support when others couldn't. Having that identity stripped away left me feeling unmoored and questioning other relationships in my life. If my own family could manipulate me so completely, how could I trust my judgment about anyone else's intentions? I decided to seek professional help, something I'd considered before but never prioritized. The therapist I found specialized in family trauma and financial abuse, and she helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't uncommon. Families often develop dysfunctional patterns around money, especially when one member has significantly more resources than others. The key insight was that healthy relationships involve mutual respect and honesty, even when there are financial imbalances. Through therapy, I learned to recognize the manipulation tactics that had been used against me. The emotional appeals about family loyalty, the urgent timelines that prevented careful consideration, the guilt-inducing language about how much they hated to ask. These were all classic manipulation strategies designed to override my logical thinking and appeal to my emotions. Understanding the psychology behind these tactics helped me feel less foolish about having fallen for them. The healing process also involved rebuilding my social connections outside of my family. I'd spent so much energy managing family crises and financial requests that I'd neglected friendships and other relationships. Reconnecting with college friends, investing more deeply in workplace relationships, and exploring new social activities helped me remember who I was beyond my role as the family bank account. One of the most valuable connections I made was with a support group for people who had experienced financial abuse from family members. Hearing other people's stories helped me understand that family financial manipulation exists across all economic levels and family structures. The group provided practical advice about setting boundaries, rebuilding trust, and managing the ongoing relationships with family members who had been manipulative. 6 months after the barbecue incident, I felt strong enough to have limited contact with my family again. The conversations were awkward and surface level at first, but I maintained firm boundaries about financial discussions. I made it clear that I would no longer provide money for emergencies, planned expenses, or any other purposes, and that any attempts to manipulate me financially would result in immediate loss of contact. Some family relationships improved with these new boundaries, while others remained strained. Ashley eventually apologized for her role in the deception, though she continued to minimize its impact. Kevin maintained that the whole situation had been blown out of proportion, but he stopped making financial requests. Mom struggled with the new dynamic, but gradually learned to relate to me without expecting financial support. Dad remained defensive and resentful, and our relationship never fully recovered. The most important lesson I learned was that genuine love doesn't come with financial expectations. The people who truly cared about me were those who valued my presence rather than my ability to solve their problems with money. This realization led me to reevaluate all my relationships and invest more deeply in those that were based on mutual respect and genuine affection. I also learned to trust my instincts about manipulation and deception. The signs had been there throughout the barbecue situation, from the inconsistent social media activity to the coordinated family responses. In the future, I would pay attention to these red flags rather than dismissing them in favor of maintaining family harmony. 2 years later, I hosted my own barbecue celebration with friends and chosen family members who had supported me through the healing process. It was smaller than the elaborate family gatherings I'd organized in the past, but it was filled with genuine joy and appreciation. The tradition that had been corrupted by deception and manipulation was reclaimed as something pure and meaningful. The experience taught me that family relationships, like all relationships, must be based on honesty and mutual respect to be truly valuable. Blood relationships don't entitle people to special consideration if they're unwilling to treat you with basic human decency. And sometimes, the greatest act of love for yourself and others is to establish boundaries that protect everyone from destructive patterns. Have you ever experienced financial manipulation from family members, or found yourself questioning whether someone's financial emergencies were genuine? Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or similar experiences. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics, personal boundaries, and healing from toxic relationships. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing that they're not alone in facing family financial manipulation. Remember that your worth isn't measured by your ability to solve other people's problems, and that true family supports your well-being rather than exploiting your generosity. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you recognize your own value and the importance of protecting your emotional and financial health. Take care of yourselves, and remember that you deserve relationships built on honesty and genuine love.